Well, hello. I thought I would just do a quick little mini tutorial on how to use the mesh transform feature in Manga Studio. Here we have a character, an original character of mine for a graphic novel I'm working on, and I'm going to zoom in real close here. Now this is a document that's 600 dpi and it's formatted for the standard American comic book page, and you can see here her sleeve is like this sleeve is way too wide, so I want to make this more narrow. And I usually I would just redraw it, but I thought I would just take this opportunity to kind of like walk you through how to use the mesh transform tool. So first we go here to the marquee tool, and one thing to understand about the toolbar, incidentally, is that the icons will change depending on what tool you use. So it's important that you not, like in real estate, you have to remember the location of the tools. Like I know that this tool, second row, first tool, is always going to be where I can access the text or balloons no matter what the icon is. So getting used to the icon isn't enough. You have to remember where the tools are, and these are various brushes I've collected throughout the months and years I've been using Manga Studio 5. So in any case, we want to go up here to the marquee tool. Now I have it set, I have the tool property always visible, and I just find this easier because that way I can make changes on the fly or just go back to whatever I've saved by clicking on the reset button here, or I can make the tool detail appear by clicking on this, and I can make changes there. One thing that I like to do for all my tools, including brushes and such, is to go to the correction section and click on the icon here, the little eye icon, and make sure able to snap is always visible, because if I'm using rulers, perspective tools, or anything, being able to just turn off the snap for whatever tool I'm using can be very helpful if I want to like draw a quick little freehand thing in a perspective drawing. Instead of going up, turning off the rulers and doing that, it's just going over here to the tool properties, unclick the able to snap, and now I can draw freehand, and then snapping here I can snap right back to whatever ruler perspective tool I'm using. So that's an aside. Now let's get down to business. So it's here in layer 1. Usually I give my layers descriptive names, but since this is just like a rough drawing, I could just call this one roughs, and me being a lazy person, I just quickly just type in rough, and so now I know that it's like my rough intermediate pencils. So I want to select this, so very carefully I select what I want to change and then a little bit more. Here I want to go right up to the line, but seeing how I'll only be changing like this area here, I selected a little bit more so that way I have some room to play around with. And now, because there's not a actual button here, and although we would think that it's in selection, it's not. We have to go to edit and then transform, and then here we have the mesh transformation. Couple things before we make any changes. Let's look at the tool properties here. In fact, let's look at the full tool properties window here. And here we have a number of things. This is just a general transforming settings. What we want to do, this means we can set things back. We can reset the transformation if we've made things a total mess. So that's always good. We can flip it either on the horizontal or vertical. We can accept the changes or cancel the changes. This is really nice. Center rotation is default to the center, but you can change it to any position you want, including free position, which is good if you're making like any scalings or rotating. You can move the center point very easily by just clicking and dragging, and so that's really good for just general selections. When we're doing a mesh transform, it actually has very little to do with it, or at least in my my thing. But you notice here we can go to center and it snaps up to the center, but the moment you move it, it goes to free position. So that's kind of cool. So here we can keep the original image by clicking on this. It'll keep the original image, so it'll be really good. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just make a copy of the layer here and then just work off the copy, so that way I always have a fallback. But I'm not doing that because, one, I'm not working from a script and I'm stupid. But in any case, keep the original image, and then here, this is important, the mesh settings. This will have us, determine how many divisions the mesh will be split up into. And you notice that even though we can set the lattices, the lines here, it's grayed out. That's because, well, first off, that's because we've made changes to it. Anything you do inside here, the moment you change something, even if it's the center point, will lock in these lattices. Sometimes it's good to have a number of them, but one thing to keep in mind when you're working with lattices, the more fine it is, so the more divisions you have, the finer control you'll have over the transformation, but also the more involved and intricate it becomes. So there's that. And then here, how to correct, we have a number of things. We have hard outline and smooth. I like just using the smooth, so that way whatever changes I make looks consistent with the drawing I have, more so than with the hard. So let's get rid of this. And so I want to just cancel any changes, and now you notice this goes back. One thing to look at is that we have a command bar for the selection command bar, and here we can deselect everything, we can invert the selection, and you can mouse over it and you can see all the changes you can do. One thing I've done, and it's a little bit beyond, is that we can add other things to this. So whenever you see an arrow, for instance, let me cancel out of this. Whenever you see a double-headed arrow, that means there's additional selections. So we can go down here to mesh transformation. And so now I haven't made any changes, and I can change the number of lattices. So here I can make it go to 1, and this basically becomes just like a normal free transform. And notice it's always going to be 1 higher than what we think it would be. So if I change it to 3, it divides it in half. So we have 1, 2, 3 lines here, and here on the vertical we have 1, 2. And so we can select that down to 3, and then we can go up to 4, and that gives us a standard 3 by 3 grid that we're used to, because remember the extra number is for the outside. And so now I can start moving this down, and I can just see where I want it to do. So I want it to be around here at the base of the thumb and the rest of the palm. So to do that, we can just move it, make some minor changes, and you notice that I'm even though the outside ones don't seem like they matter much, they will in some instances. So it's always good to kind of really think about it. And now I just want this a little bit more, because I want to get rid of that tangent there, and move this back, move that around, and that's about center. And now move that in, and you can see in some instances, like here, it's actually having a little bit of an effect. So it's important to just keep in mind all of this. And since it's basically a vertical change we want, I'm trying to keep all of these pretty much in line. But sometimes, you'll want to just season it a little bit more. And move that there. And you notice I'm leaving this alone, because remember we did select more than we thought we would need to change. So this becomes kind of like our bedrock. That which every change, the further away from this line we go, the more the image changes. This will help prevent any kind of unsightly white lines and such that we get from making transformations to a selection. So we can follow the curve because remember the wrist is right there, and so that's pretty much what we want. I'm just going to tuck this in a little bit more so we get a straight fall down, because again it's important. I like to try and keep in mind the materials that we're working with. Since this is a cloth sleeve, I want the fabric to be kind of heavy, kind of like resilient to gravity, but still obeying gravity to an extent. So that's basically it, and it looks still a little bit too wide, so I'm going to just go a little bit more extreme here. Darn it, I keep on forgetting that you have to get a little white arrow, a little white fill triangle in order to do that. So now we can just do like that, and now I can click on the O here, or I can just hit return on my keyboard. So there we go, and I can click on this. This is another button I added that will just hide the selection, so this still allows me to make changes. And you can see that I can undo real quick, and you can see the changes that it makes. So definitely it makes a big change, and it looks good, and it is slightly, well, if I wasn't doing the talking and stuff, it would have been much faster than trying to redraw it myself. And I keep the same various basic line widths and such. So now when I go over this to do my final inking or refining pass, it'll be like I'll have like a really good baseline to work from. So I can click here. Now I've mentioned that, oh, you can make changes to this. How can you do this? The one button at the end, we can do the selection launcher, and this will pop up a window. Let me bring it down from my other monitor. This will bring down a window that you can actually make some changes. So you can see, if you click here, you can see that I have these icons, and this was what I wanted to add. So let me see what I can do here. See, I have some other ones. I have advanced fill, that. So if you want to make any, and this one will actually register whatever selected as a material. That's handy, and that will show border of selected area, and that's a toggle, so you can click on that to show, click on that to hide. This one will outline selection. So what I can do, let's say we want to add something to the shrink selected area or the clear button. So I can go to here to selection, and I can just well, actually this would be expand, shrink. So instead of, I want to add to the shrink selection a blur border, so I can just click right there, and then you can go to the menu command that you want, and then I can just add, and this will add it to the left of this, or insert into group, and I can do that, and you can see that it adds it to the group just like that. So now I can click on OK, and now you can see, first off, let's deselect, and now we can reselect, and now you can see that we have the double arrow button here, and then we can do that. So I could actually put the this button here that will expand the selection. I can add that to that if I want. So we can hit this button again. Let me hit this button again, and we can see, yep, we can drag and drop things. So now we can actually arrange things. So we have expand, shrink, and blur. And so now that's all one, and it helps simplify the menus, at least to my mind, and it puts things logically, like this controls the border a bit. And so that's how you can do this. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that we've basically have made a change not only to the selection launcher, but with adding this blur, but we've also made changes to the actual desktop layout. So you can go to Window, Workspace, and this changes the workspace. If you're using a dual monitor setup, or if you're using a graphic tablet and such, this can be really important to always make sure. So what we want to do is to register this workspace, and I like to do for numbering and such, to keep things in order. I like to start off with a 2-digit number for the year, so it'd be 16, and then the month, it's February, and then the date, it's 11. So there we go, and now I can, it would help if I would bring this down here. And so now I typed in workspace, I added a space, and then I added 2 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, and I'll click OK. One good thing about using a naming format like this is that no matter what you can look at in the Finder, or in Windows Explorer, or in most file open close dialogues, and you can easily, it'll order them, and it'll always order them in chronological order, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to worry about clicking on date created or anything like that. So this is a nice little thing, and you notice that I usually will sign my artwork with a sequence like this, so the more you know. So I can click on OK, and you can see that on the workspace all these things also get set. So palette showing status, command bar setting, it also includes the selection launcher. So you can click on OK, and now it's saved, and I don't have to worry about suddenly losing commands, shortcuts, or anything like that, because I have my copy of Manga Studio very tricked out. So that's it. So basically all we did was, using the lasso tool, selected the area we wanted to change, then used mesh transformation, either from the command, either from the selection launcher, or you can go to edit and then transform, and then you can choose mesh transformations. And then very carefully we just move these things around after setting our horizontal and vertical lattice to what we want. Now, one other thing we can do here is, let's click on that. Let's say we want to add some text. So her title is Law Lord, so I can just click on where the text tool should be, click on text, and I can just type in, and this is just for edification. So we can type in that, and we can scale it up to be about where we want. Now let's say we want the letters to be curved and such, and we want to do this in a fast and easy way. So we just click out of that, and we can use a selection tool, whatever, and now we can just click on that, right click, and do rasterize, and then we can just use our selection tool again, use a rectangular marquee, so we get something. We just select everything inside of that, and then we can do our mesh transformation. And remember earlier about the more lattices we have, the harder it is to change things. So we want to just get rid of all of the vertical ones. So now we only have the horizontal to worry about. Up that a little bit, and because I want to try and hit it so that each letter kind of has its own lattice. And so now I can just go up to where the middle is and lift that up, and we can get a nice little line, and I can just move it around so that all the changes are pretty much straight up and down and not, curving in on itself, because that's not what I want. But here we can just repeat the same thing and try and keep things as consistent as possible without changing it too awfully much, like that. And so here we have a nice little thing, and it looks like it would be kind of nice to have the letters kind of go up and down like that, like the scrolls that she's carrying. And so this is one aspect of lettering that I feel like a lot of people don't give enough thought of, is to have the lettering fit the character itself. And then we can just bring these up a little bit, because one really nice thing about the mesh transformation is that it will help smooth out. It will help, instead of making things all angular, if you have enough lattices here, it'll make things really nice and curved, and it looks really nice. And now we can just accept it. Oops. See, I went click happy there for a moment, so let's recreate that as quickly as we can. Hey, we want to just see one unfortunate aspect is that usually when you hold down shift, it will keep things moving in the horizontal or vertical, depending on the direction that you drag things. But with these lattice points, that does not happen. So we'll do a nice curved aspect to it, so it looks like a roller coaster-esque kind of thing. And so just like with sketching, you want to get it roughly where you want, and then spend a little bit of your time finessing things out, making things fit more with what it's looking like. There we go. And now I could just spread these out and such, and spread things out by eye, so things are pretty much uniform, or proportionately what I want it to be. And this is the one aspect that really a little bit of time helps, to be really careful. But you can see that just by having just two, the minimum two horizontal and many vertical lattices, you can actually make a lot of changes and not have to worry about a lot of lattices here that you would have to also coordinate. We could have added just one more, and that way we would have one more level of complexity to worry about and to change things. So again, it's seasoned to taste. And now we click on the O. That accepts the changes. And you notice that the selection also changes, the outline, the marching ants. The marquee also changes, so now we can go up here and just do like a free transform. And so we can do our scaling, uncheck ratio, and then we can actually start doing some pretty fun things if we want. But we're going to go back to the original. So that's it, and a whole lot more about setting up Manga Studio and things. Because the one thing to remember when you're making changes to any kind of command bar, shortcuts and such, to always make sure you save your desktop layouts. That way, in case of a crash or something, you have some place to go to. In fact, you can set it up so that way you have a different you have different settings for this. This is my general drawing one because I know I'll be drawing and then painting in the same thing, and so I have my color palette here. I can change my color selection. I can do a Command D, Shift D, and I can go back to the default. Now that's a shortcut that I added to it, but that's another tutorial entirely. But always, whenever you make changes to any kind of command palette or selection launcher, save your desktop layout. Again, that's going to Window, Workspace, and then save your workspace. One trick you can do is that whenever you make changes to the workspace, you'll have to register it, and if you give it the name of your current workspace, it will overwrite the old one. So that way you can just use, you can have your favorites, and as long as you save it with the same name, it'll always be updating, but you have to remember to do that. So that's it. A little bit more long-winded than I wanted, but basically that's how I use the mesh selection tool and such, and you can get some really good results from it. Just remember, if you do too much stretching or scaling up and such, you will lose a lot of the sharpness of the line, which is another reason why I work at 600 dpi, and then when I export I downsample to 600 dpi, and that way I get, I retain a lot of the smoothness and sharpness of the various lines that I use in case I scale things up or down. So that's it. Hope this was helpful. Bye bye.